Thank you so much, and thank you all for being here. I see some students from my Border Consciousness class. I'm happy that you're here. Too bad more of your classmates aren't here. It's a class that explores all the different kinds of borders that cross our lives as Chicanos and Chicanas and Latinos and Latinas. But actually, if you think about it, all of us have borders running through our backs. And I'm particularly thrilled to be here to introduce Hector, not only because I'm an admirer of Hector's work, but also because I'm very appreciative of the work that the collaboration that YRL always does with Chicana and Chicano studies. You are always there for us and very supportive of our work, and I'm very happy to give back. So thank you so much. On his homepage, Hector describes himself simply as a writer, the son of Guatemalan immigrants, and native of the city of Los Angeles. He's published 2 books, numerous essays, and hundreds of newspaper stories. These days, he writes a weekly column for the LA Times. That's his simple self-introduction on his homepage. Other than The Tattooed Soldier, his fabulous revenge tale about a hunter and his prey, kind of in reverse, in the tunnels and alleys of downtown Los Angeles, which was published by Delphinium Books in 1998 and in paperback by Penguin Books in 2000, Hector has also published a work of nonfiction titled Translation Nation, Defining a New American Identity in the Spanish-Speaking United States, published by Riverhead Books in 2005, which is a journey through what he calls the Latin American Republic of the United States. Love that. From Los Angeles to Kansas, Alabama, and beyond. Critics describe The Tattooed Soldier as a gripping tale of revenge set on the lowest rung of LA's social ladder amidst the hard-scrabble lives of illegal immigrants and the homeless. The complexities of the characters give this novel power and weight, said Publishers Weekly. Fort Worth Star-Telegram says, Hector Tovar's tensely drawn novel does what the political novel has always done at its best. It makes you look closely at your world, look harder, fiercer, and with a colder eye, and ask yourself the endless question, what must I do? Of Translation Nation, critics said the following in the New York Times Sunday Book Review, which is a real coup to be a Latino writer and have your book reviewed in the Sunday Times. I'm still waiting for one of mine to be reviewed on there. The New York Times Sunday Book Review said, a triumph of observation cross-wires Tocqueville's Democracy in America with Che Guevara's Motorcycle Diaries. I thought that was particularly appropriate. And in Booklist in a starred review, it said, in plain, stirring prose, this landmark documentary brings close the universals of exodus and displacement, as Tovar reveals the unsettling particulars of Americans who are restless and always longing for home, wherever that is. I'm always interested in the genesis of a story because I wear a second hat. I'm not just an academic, I'm also a writer, as you heard. And I'm always interested in what inspires writers to write the books that they write, especially what inspires an idea for a novel. On his homepage, Hector tells us how he conceptualized Translation Nation. The idea for Translation Nation came to me one afternoon in Los Angeles after driving through downtown in one of those neighborhoods where Spanish is spoken more than English. I'd been writing about immigrant LA for a decade. I'd covered the 1992 riots and seen the first hints of a future explosion of political activism. What will American democracy look like, I wondered, in a community where almost all the people are sons and daughters of Latin America? La Reconquista, right? Hector cut his teeth as a writer in journalism, writing for a San Francisco community newspaper called El Tecolote, and later on an internship with the LA Times in the 1980s as a rookie reporter assigned to do the dirty work, the stories about poverty, homelessness, police violence, thus becoming familiar with the seedier aspects of life in the great metropolis of Los Angeles. He writes, in 1989, I wrote a front-page story about Salvadoran soldiers joining the stream of refugees from Central America to Southern California. A social worker at the agency El Rescate told me a story about a client of hers who had spotted a death squad member in MacArthur Park, which was the central meeting place of LA's Central American community. That anecdote became the germ, many years later, of The Tattooed Soldier. The Tattooed Soldier was a finalist for the PEN USA West Award for Fiction, which honors writers through an array of awards given annually in recognition of outstanding literary achievement by writers living west of the Mississippi. Now, this speaker series is called The Detective Novel in the Central American Experience. And in that vein, Hector wrote a bona fide detective story called Once More Lazarus in the anthology Los Angeles Noir, published by Akashic Books in 2007. He continues to write his weekly column for the LA Times, and most recently, just a few days ago, he wrote about his experience serving on a jury in criminal court. Great story. In that story, he gives us a good working definition of a journalist. He says, "You may think of us journalists as busybodies, but we really aren't. We're voyeurs who look at crime and other spectacles from a distance." As you can see, Hector Tovar is a complex writer, a Los Angeles writer, a raza writer. Help me in welcoming Hector Tovar.
Thank you so much, doctoras, for that introduction. I really am someone who owes a lot to the University of California in many ways. First, because I have my BA from UC Santa Cruz, because I wrote The Tattooed Soldier as my MFA thesis at UC Irvine in creative writing, and because really University of California professors all up and down the system are among my biggest fans and have kept my work in print. This book almost went out of print circa 2002, I think, and the audience for it grew thanks to many professors who assigned it in the curriculum, because now we have this generation of immigrants from Mexico and from Guatemala and El Salvador who are entering this intellectual, this process of intellectual searching, questioning, exploration. And my book is one of the few that allows them to examine their own experience and reflect on their own experience, not just as something that personally happened to them, but as an intellectual experience. And I'm very proud to have written it for that. And all of the suffering that I went to, which my wife, who's sitting here in the back, Virginia Espino, has witnessed firsthand, is more than worth it just to see, just to be read and to feel like I've contributed something to the history of my community. It's really difficult to be a writer, as many of you in this room know, because the remuneration isn't always great. The delay between the conceptualization of something and the creation of it is often very, very long. And then often, the main thing that happens to us as writers is just to sort of feel like we're ignored by our culture. And it's not really that we're ignored, it's just that the subculture that reads and that appreciates books is very small. And so we have occasionally these gatherings in which all of us sort of get together and celebrate each other's work, because there's so few of us really who aren't producing, cultural producers producing for this sort of really archaic form that goes back to Gutenberg, and even before that it goes back to Herodotus and so many other people. And so I'm really thankful to all of you for being part of that community, for being part of that culture that is keeping alive our ideas and teaching them to a new generation. It's extremely important. And I wouldn't be sitting here as a writer if it weren't for all of you. Now, having said all that, I'd like to talk a little bit about my novel, The Tattooed Soldier, and how it was that I came to write it. The main character, the protagonist of The Tattooed Soldier, is a refugee called Antonio. And he is someone who was college educated in Guatemala. And in many ways, he's my alter ego because he is a frustrated intellectual. All the works that I have tend to have a frustrated intellectual in them. Because that's sort of like they say, write what you know. Well, that's something that I know really intimately. And so Antonio is someone who was a poet, a literary person in Guatemala, falls in love in college, as many people do, and tragically loses his wife. His wife is killed by a death squad in the war. And he becomes a refugee. He joins the stream of refugees north to Los Angeles from Guatemala. And he has emotional problems, and so he